Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the LSX tutorial series. In this part I'm going to go into more detail about the timeline. So as you can see, the main part of LSX consists of a timeline with a lot of lines on it. In total you have 129 lines, so that's more than enough for any show that you might have in mind. I find myself using 20 or 25 lines at the very maximum if I'm doing something really complicated, so you shouldn't be afraid to ever run out of lines. And even when you run out of lines, there are ways to reduce the amount of lines you need, so you don't need to worry about that. The first thing I want to show you is these row of buttons. So most of them are pretty obvious. You have show play, that plays the whole show once, so it will go from the beginning to the end and then stop there automatically. There's also edit play. Notice as I press this button that this button got selected, and this is the loop button, and this means that the show will loop between the end and the beginning continuously. And then you have, obviously, you can start from the beginning, pause, stop, go backwards, fast forward, set beginning, set end, so now it will loop between these two. You can also drag them around with the mouse. And this button sets them to the beginning and end of the show. You can add markers. Not that these do much, but it's there for some reason. Yeah, you can also zoom in. And with this button you can deselect the option to automatically scroll to the cursor. With this button you go to the current cursor position. Maximum amount of zoom in, minimum. Zoom in, zoom out. Well, that's pretty obvious, I guess. Okay, so a standard LSX show is always 10 seconds long when you open it by default. To change this, you can double click on this black bar or press this button. If you don't see this, it means that you don't have audio visualization enabled. And that's these three buttons, so now there is no visualization, mono and stereo. I prefer to have it on mono at all times. So just this button, and this brings up the audio dialog window. In the upper left corner you can change the length of the show. For example, 5 minutes 25 seconds. You can delay when the show begins to play, to add an offset between the music and the actual output of the show. You can also change to what LSX responds to what determines the speed of the show of LSX. Now it is to the internal clock of the computer, so it just goes linearly with the time. You can also have an LCD, a WAV file, have external control with MIDI, Windows Media Live, where you can control the speed of the show with an event on the timeline. You can have Venom control it, or you can have an audio file. To load an audio file, set the timecode to audio file and then press this button to load the audio file. And here you have a list of all the standard LSX audio files. When you load in an audio file, it will prompt you to change the length of the time of the show, so that the length of the audio file matches the length of the show. So, well, that's a good idea to do. Then you can also press this button to start the audio visualization analysis. You have to do this manually for some reason. And it will render some kind of wave type with the music, so you can synchronize the show with the music. Okay. You can also choose between several visualization types. Okay, it picked a file that is empty between here. And this is for copyright reasons. Okay, so in LSX, a show is composed of events that you put on the timeline. To put an event on the timeline, double-click somewhere where you want to place the event. This brings up this event window. Here you can see a list of all the more frequent used events. They are grouped in source events that provide a source of laser output, 3D transform events that can transform the output of source events in 3D space, color transform events to alter the color, events that can control external devices, and procedure events that are used for more complicated functions in LSX. Also, notice that you have a More button that brings up all the possible events possible in LSX. So there are really a lot of events, but most of them you will never use. To give you an example, I will show you the TTF event. TTF is short for True Type Font. It's just basic text, so stretch it out on the timeline like this and press edit play. Okay. Double click it and this brings up this window. So you can type in some text you want. Okay, and you get output directly. As you can see, it does not look very well in the preview window. To fix this, press OK. And go to these buttons on the left side. If I deselect this, the beams disappear. Similarly, there is one button for the 8 timelines. Similarly, there is a button that removes the graphic output, so you can have only the beams if I want to, but obviously I only want the graphic output. Okay, so also the text is a bit too tall to be nice, so you can reduce it here, like 0.15. Okay, looks pretty good. Maybe set it a bit like that. You have here some options to add more optimization points if you find it necessary, but I think by default it's more or less always a pretty good result, so usually I leave these alone. You get some other options like run text that runs the text, scroll text that moves it up and down, and yeah, you can do whatever you want. It should be kind of obvious, and if you don't know it, just test it out. Okay, you can add, for example, a 3D transform event, like rotate Z, for example. Stretch it out under it. And this rotates the text. A 3D transform event always applies to the source event that is above it. If I put the transform event above the TTF event, it won't have an effect anymore. Also, if you have multiple source events, like another TTF event, it will only apply to the one that is directly above it. But you can have spaces or other events between them, no problem. But it applies only to the source event that is directly above it. So that's good to know. You can have other events like a color transform event. Very nice. Notice how some events have similar names like rotate X, world rotate X, shift X, pre-move X, post-move X, and if you apply them, you will notice they all have more or less the same effect. There is a difference between them, but I'm going to explain that later on. Okay, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.